Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Conversations in Pop Culture, where I have with me comic artist, illustrator, package designer, toy designer Adam Riches, who has done just about everything in the art realm. So, welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going? Happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to do you because you've done everything. And I
A
think the
little bit.
perfect place to start, as you can see in your background, is you're a big GI Joe fan,
Yeah.
so knowing is half the battle. So, how are you first introduced to GI Joe? Because I know it holds a special place in your heart.
Yeah, that's an understatement, right? I don't really know the answer, honestly. I mean, I think like everyone else, like probably 4 or 5 years old. So I guess it would have been like 89, 90, right around that time. Just, it was everywhere. There was a cartoon, there was comics, there was toys. So I got fully immersed. And, the only difference between me and everyone else is at some point they outgrew it and I didn't. Uh,
Yeah, and just to even go further into that, you have a very unique story, and it involves Neil Johnson, the owner of Emerald City Comics, who
uh,
kind of gave you an opportunity very early on where you were sorting through some collections and you kind of got experience with the entire business of comics in that realm. So, what was that like? Because I think that further solidified your love for it.
Oh yeah, you've done good research. Yeah, Neil's a great guy. He's like a second father to me. There was a comic store that was local to me at the time, Emerald City Comics. Which is still in existence. It's one of the best comic stores in Florida. It's in Clearwater for anyone that is near there. Um, but yeah, I started going there probably 8 or 9 years old maybe, and it was really cool because at the time, as a GI Joe collector, I kind of got into it late in the game. So all the characters that were featured in the cartoon, the primary, Duke, Cobra Commander, Baroness, they didn't have figures. And as a kid, and this is sort of pre-internet or early internet, you just think Hasbro's dropping the ball. I didn't understand where those things were. And when I found this comic store, he had huge back inventory and he was buying loose collections. And so all of a sudden it was like this, epiphany that all this stuff existed that I didn't know about. So he was very gracious to me, and I would come there after school, sort parts for them. He would give me store credit, but it is kind of funny in hindsight. But when I was probably like, I don't know, say between 16 and 20, I was constantly begging him for a job, and he denies this to this day. I don't remember that at all, buddy. But like I did, and they didn't hire me, and then years later, I ended up, doing exclusive comic covers with them and stuff. So it's just funny how it all kind of worked, but. He's still a good friend of mine to this day, and I definitely encourage anyone to check out that store because it's just massive. You wouldn't believe the amount of stuff they have.
And let's talk about that exclusive that you did. I believe it is GI Joe Real American Hero 212, and it's
It
a
is. In fact, I've
very
got since I knew we were going to be doing some comics talk here, I've got like a whole bin full of like all my comics down here. So if we need visual aid at some point in this. Of course, I'm failing you right now by saying that because there's like a million books in this box. But okay, there you go. This one. So yeah,
yeah. Let's
212.
talk about that one because that one's the most interesting because I
Sure.
believe this was your first exposure into GI Joe from actually doing a cover. It holds a very unique record of 280 characters on
Yeah.
it. And what was that like? And really going all the way out for it. Your first GI Joe comic that you worked on, holding the record. I think it's still the record, from my
I
understanding.
believe so. Yeah.
So how
Well,
did this all come about and everything in between?
I had wanted to work on GI Joe forever, and when I went to art school, that was kind of my whole end game was I was going to work on GI Joe. I mean, like that was just that was my destiny, right? Like there was no question in my mind about this, except when I graduated, like GI Joe was already kind of starting its decline at retail, and there wasn't any opportunity there really, and like I was endlessly harassing Hasbro to try and get a job there, but I when I saw that the comic was maybe a different avenue to approach, I started trying to get my way in there, and wasn't really making much headway. And then finally, kind of got the idea that well, maybe if we partnered with somebody to do an exclusive cover, that would be my sort of backdoor entry point into getting into to do a GI Joe comic. And if I could just even get that just one time, that would get me enough notice that I could kind of make something out of it. So I talked to IDW, we talked to Emerald City, we thought there might be a partnership there to do this. And then when I started talking to Neil, he said, well, what did you have in mind? And I was like, I don't know. And then I was like, so I just started reaching out of the bag of tricks. Like, what's the most like ridiculous over the top thing you could do that's going to garner attention? Well, I don't know, draw every character ever. And, about 5 minutes into that decision, I started to regret it. But you know, I still really have a fondness for that. I mean, it took 34 days to draw that. So, but obviously, here we are years later still talking about it. So obviously it was a good decision in hindsight, and it led to me doing quite a bit of work on the GI Joe comic and toy line. So, it was a good move all around.
Yeah, and to talk about that, I mean, what was that like from a personal experience and even a professional experience? Because it did open up a lot of doors for you to get your first GI Joe book done, and then have the record and have that clout and have almost every GI Joe character ever on that
Yeah.
book. Because that's something that's very unique and very cool. And you said it perfectly. We're still talking about it today, 5 years out.
Yep. This sounds weird, but sometimes like you get so immersed in something that even though you're really passionate about it, and even though you really love what you're doing, at some point it just becomes a job. Which is strange because like obviously with the benefit of hindsight now, years later, I look back on it and I'm very proud of it and I'm very fond of it. But at that time, it's just trying to figure out how you're going to power through it and get it done. And so um, I try really hard to take opportunities and always find a way to parlay them into the next thing. I'm one of those people that if you crack the window, I'll find a way to blow the door down. So you just have to figure out that entry point. And I think for me, that was that. And so I really viewed that as this is my one and only opportunity, and you just got to kind of go big or go home. And so I did. And it really led to a lot of great things. I mean, I think that book still to this day is paying off in dividends in many ways, because I met a lot of people that I'm still friends with through that. It led to, and that's how networking works. Those people go on to have other jobs, start their own companies. You end up working with them and meeting more people. And so, I almost can't even really tell you the full extent of what that did for me, because it's just, it was like a miracle to come into my life at that time, the amount of stuff that came as a result of it. But I think even more than that, probably the best thing to come up for me was that it really endeared me to a lot of the GI Joe fandom, and I got to know a lot of them really well, and that's a really special thing for me too, because I am a fan, and I tell people this, and it sounds like some like a fake humble brag or something. It's really not though. Like GI Joe Con in 2011 and 2012, I was in the audience as a fan. I paid to be there. GI Joe Con 2013, I'm on the stage talking about working on GI Joe. I mean, that's really how the transition happened, and so. For me, it's just so cool to get to know those people. And I mean, if you go on any of the GI Joe Facebook groups, you'll see I'm still very regularly active in them. So, it's just those opportunities to not only get to work on it further, but to get to know the fan base better, I think is really the greatest thing to come of it for me.
And to even talk further about GI Joe, one of the things that is kind of your trademark and your signature that came out of this is you did 8 covers of the action figure GI Joe.
Mm.
And I was going to name a few of them: Commando, Bazooka Soldier, Counterintelligence, Ranger, Machine Gunner, Laser Rifle Trooper, Infantry Trooper, and you did a Cobra Commander action figure. And so where did that come from, and what was the idea behind that? Because there's clearly an 80s, 90s vibe, going to Kmart type vibe to pick them up and begging your mom to go allow you to have one of them. And
so there's actually a really
nostalgic.
funny story about those. So I guess, I don't know, say the late aughts, you started to see action figure covers becoming a thing in comics. And I thought that was a really cool idea. I loved it. And at that point, it really hadn't been done to death, which, I think to some extent it has now. But I was actually talking to the editor of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles at IDW and telling them, man, this would be the greatest action figure cover. Like, it's the Ninja Turtles is based on a comic. It's a toy. This all ties together. I said, this would be the perfect marriage. And at that time, he was kind of like, that's a little bit derivative of what Marvel's doing, so we don't really want to do that or whatever. And I was like, man, but I already illustrate the actual packaging for GI Joe toys. Like, I feel like I'd be really good at this. You guys should really consider it. No, okay. And then like a week later, I get an email from the GI Joe editor at IDW, and he's like, is it true that you do GI Joe toy packaging? I'm like, I've been telling you guys this for years. And he's like, oh, well, I'm like, yeah. And I mean, actually, if you look up here, there's, I've got a whole wall full of them that I've I've done. But so I said to him at that time, I was like, we should be doing this. And so he was like, well, we should do GI Joe toy covers. And I was like, yeah, I know. So when we got to do those, that was just really cool. And I tried to find ways to kind of put little Easter eggs in there that the fans will notice that differentiate them from their actual toys. So like, there's lots of little fun things in there. Like the character Zap, for example, has a mustache on his packaging art, but the toy never did. So I gave the toy a mustache on that cover. Fun little stuff like that. But but that's how that came about. And like everything else, that just, one thing snowballs into a next. Because of that, I did a whole bunch of other action figure covers.
Yeah, and we're going to hold off on a few of those for 1 second because there's
Sure.
one more GI Joe cover that I want to talk about. That's pure GI Joe,
Yeah.
and that is 252, your WonderCon exclusive. And in many
Oh,
ways, that solidifies your GI Joe getting a convention exclusive and a respectable convention exclusive to some degree as well. And so,
yeah.
what was that like? And that's a step outside of the action figure. And we're going to talk about Street Fighter in a minute too,
Sure.
but what was that like, really even having the privilege and the honor and the trust from both GI Joe and Hasbro and IDW and WonderCon? Because in many ways, I don't want to say you made it because that's when we start losing in life, but it's a
Sure.
step in the right direction.
It kind of goes back to the thing I said before. It's like it just becomes a job. And I know that sounds horrible. Like, I don't mean it to sound bad, but like, and I'm very appreciative of every opportunity. But I think at some point you get so wrapped up in the work. And I don't think people realize, because I always say, like, artists are total introverts. I spend 90% of my life sitting at a desk. So when you see me on stage talking to 1,000 people in a room, that's actually an anomaly. Like, that's very uncomfortable and very different for me. Like, that's the vast majority of my life is spent in solitude working. So I think when this stuff comes up, you don't expect it, but it's just one project rolls into the next, and you feel like you're just the avalanche coming down the hill, gaining momentum, And so when this stuff comes up, it's like, oh, cool, awesome, all right, another thing to add to the list, But like, you're so wrapped up in the work that you almost don't even realize the prestige or the gravity or whatever you want to call it of these assignments until long after they're over with and out into the public consciousness. I think sometimes I almost feel like more grateful when I talk to somebody about it years later, or when I see a photo of somebody's collection and I see it hanging on their wall, and I'm like, whoa, like I drew something that's hanging on some guy's wall in Germany, or you know what I mean, something like that. Like that's almost more like, I think that's when it really hits you, because in the moment you're just like, it's just work, and the deadlines can get so out of control that if you don't just kind of keep your head down and keep the nose to the grindstone, that can get out of hand real quickly.
And
So I
then,
think it's just staying focused.
and then I mentioned Street Fighter because you did do
Oh
a
yeah.
cool double pack with Snake Eyes and M. Bison from Street Fighter. And a lot of people know Street Fighter, a lot of people
Yep.
know G.I. Joe. And it was a crossover comic. And what was that like, getting to do that action figure and contribute to that crossover? Because we have two, I guess, properties that are well respected and have huge fan bases that span multi generations. And to be a part of that, that's a cool book to see.
Oh, oh, thanks. Yeah, that one that came as a direct result of doing the GI Joe figure covers in around late 2015. I think I had been in LA, and I went down to San Diego and just hung out at IDW for a day and was hanging out with the editors and stuff. And they had said, I think at that time, I don't even know if the GI Joe covers had started coming out yet, but we were already well underway and working on them. And I think they were really liking how they were turning out, and so they said to me, hey, how would you feel about working on a GI Joe Street Fighter book? And of course, I was elated because I'm very much of that age. I mean, Street Fighter 2 and GI Joe were like peanut butter and jelly in my childhood, and obviously Hasbro in 1993 had done a series of Street Fighter action figures that made use of GI Joe parts. So there was already kind of a built-in crossover there for me. So I felt like it was a really easy thing to kind of marry on a comic book cover. So if you analyze that, like I stole a lot of visual cues from both the game and the action figures. So like the Snake Eyes art, I did like one of the character select screen arts from Street Fighter 2. So it was really cool to work on that. I wish that had become a big, huge ongoing thing, and we'd gotten to do a ton of them, because I would have loved to have played in that sandbox for a while longer.
Yeah, and even talking about the sandbox and taking a step outside of comics, you mentioned that you do G.I. Joe packaging as well. And that
Yeah.
kind of led into the comics and all of the action figure stuff with IDW. And so, what is that like? Because when you go to a store and you see an action figure, there are only a few people who do this in the world. And that helps to sell the toys. So, what was that entire experience like, and really building that out? Because it's pretty cool stuff. And I remember going to Kmart and Walmart and Target and picking up and seeing action figures. And I like looking at the W action figures as well, which we're going to talk about
Yeah.
in a few minutes. But what is that like for you? And then to bring that into the comic world and get to play in both sectors, because they are slightly different.
I mean, I won't lie, it's pretty damn cool. Like, I have the same experience as you. I mean, I grew up going to retail and being mesmerized by it. And I would really think to a large degree, the packaging art is what sold those figures for me. Like, it was very common that you would see a figure that was maybe not the coolest, but his art was so cool that it kind of lured you in. And so, getting the opportunity to work on that stuff was just awesome. I mean, it was originally how that got started was in 2010, the GI Joe Collectors Club was doing a figure of a character called Big Lob as their membership figure that year. And he was a character that never had a toy in the 80s. And I always really wanted one. And their membership figures would come in a poly bag. And so I remember I got in touch with them at the time, and I was like, you guys, this could be a really good opportunity if you put this figure on a card, and so that it looked like it fit in with the other figure from the time period where it would have originally come out. I bet that would have a huge appeal to collectors. Well, they didn't do it. But it opened up a line of dialogue between us, and a couple of years later, I kept kind of checking in on them and whittling away at that, and eventually that opened the door to start working on them, and that it's just one of those things that like once it started, it just kind of never stopped. Like, to the point that I almost just got used to it. It just became like a regular full-time thing. Like every year at certain points of the year, you could count on there's going to be this many figures, and and then this many when they do a refresh, and so. I don't remember the exact totals, but I think in the span of like 6 years, I did 51 unique figures, and then a bunch of those got turned into repaints and all kinds of posters and magazine covers and trading cards, and so it became a life of its own. But honestly, on a personal level, like separate of my own, separate of money and fulfillment and prestige and anything else, on a personal level, I think illustrating GI Joe packaging might be my favorite thing I've ever done. Or it's right up there. I mean, at least with the WWE stuff, but just because, that was one of those things that like in my wildest dreams as a kid, that's all I could have ever wanted, So I mean, I remember thinking if I could even do it once, I'd be satisfied, but when I got to do it, 50 some odd times, that was pretty awesome. And actually I'll give you a funny story. So the first figure I ever did was Iceberg, and, he's African-American. So he had to look like the character. Well, the second figure I did was Widescope, which is a Caucasian character, and he has a balaclava on, and there's not a whole lot known about him. And I thought, well, 2 figures, and this might be the last one I ever do, because I felt like that every time I did it. So I decided to use myself as the model for that character. So I am Widescope. So the second figure I ever did, I turned myself into a GI Joe.
And even to go even more personal, a lot of these toys are very accessible. Yeah. Meaning that they are in Targets, they are in Walmarts, they are in Kmart's, if Kmart is still around, and a variety of other stores are in comic shops. And so what is that like to know that you are reaching, I would safely say, at least 1 million people with these action figures, and that they are being pushed out, and that there are children who are playing with them and ripping open the cards, and there are people who are collecting them and displaying them like you have in your background. Yeah. So what is that mixture? Because it's very cool to that degree where you have both sides of the spectrum appreciating it.
It's wild for me. I'm a toy collector, obviously. So, for me, I get the same thrill as anybody else would. In fact, it's almost, because I don't want to act like I have complete credit for these things. If I designed a figure or I designed the figure's packaging or whatever, like I'm just one of the many people that had their hands in that project. So you almost feel somewhat divorced from it, yes, I did it. And when I see it, obviously I identify it's mine. I don't want to sound crazy, but at the same time, like I realize that a lot of people had their hands in it, and so for me, like I get just as much of a thrill out of seeing it and buying it almost as if I didn't do it, because this is the stuff that I'm working on. In a lot of cases, I'd be collecting myself. Like I know we're kind of jumping ahead on the timeline here, but like, this Johnny Gargano figure is brand new and he's at retail right now. And like, I designed this costume. And so to see now somebody, it's so weird to me to think that like Mattel has made a toy out of my design. So it's like now someone is like taking something I designed and like miniaturizing it and make, it's such a weird thing to see that, and to see that process come together. And so I'm almost a fan of my own work, but not really, like, cause it's like, I'd be a fan of it whether I did it or not, I just love this stuff. So honestly, it's a thrill, it's kind of surreal. Like it doesn't ever get old to see something you worked on at retail and know that all over the world people are sharing that experience. Like I have family in New Zealand, and to think that like they're able to buy something that I worked on there, like that's just such a wild thought to me.
And now we're going to back out of packaging because I want to get back to
Sure.
IDW before we get to
Sure.
WWE, and we're going to spend some time there. But I briefly
Cool.
want to talk about Micronauts as well
Yeah.
as Revolution because
Okay.
both of those things used your action figure designs. The Micronauts definitely went late 70s, early 80s
Yep.
style. Very cool. That's way before my time.
Mine too.
But I appreciate the design on that stuff. And then Revolution is cool because the five you did are double packs of everything that Hasbro has to offer, from the Transformers to the Micronauts to ROM to GI Joe and a few other things. And Mask, I think, was in there as well. Yep. And I'm a big Chris Ryle fan. He was on my other podcast, and he's great at what he does. Yeah. And it's kind of his little baby, Revolution, yep, to some degree. So what was it like getting to play in IDW and getting beyond GI Joe and really getting to play with Hasbro as well and everything they have to offer, and they trusting you to some degree?
Yeah, similar experience. Revolution was especially interesting to me just because, like, honestly, I didn't have much familiarity with Micronauts when they first approached me about doing that. I think that so Chris had asked me to do a cover for ROM, and I had done the GI Joe covers we talked about, and so I think at that point, I was kind of getting, and obviously all the actual toy work separate of comics, so I think I was getting kind of a reputation as the toy guy that was in comics, which is fine. That is what I am, But they had approached me about doing Micronauts, and sometimes as a fan of these things, that I'm such a fan of these things that, like, when I see somebody working on something I really, really love, like GI Joe, if I feel like they don't really know about it or they don't understand it, like, as a fan, you grow kind of resentful of that because you're like, why would they hire someone to work on this that doesn't know anything about it when all these other people that are just diehard fans would love to work on it and don't get to, And so I take this stuff super personally. And so when they offered me Micronauts, I dove headfirst into Micronauts world. I joined every group, every forum. I read every old comic. I started collecting the toys. I don't even know why, because, I really wanted to understand it. And I didn't want to feel like I got handed this opportunity I didn't deserve, So I really got very deeply submerged in the Micronauts world for a couple of years there. And then, coming out of that, I think it was just one of those things. Again, one job rolls into the next. Having done all those previous toy covers, they approached me one day about doing Revolution, and they said, hey, I got this, super top secret thing. Hasbro's talking about doing this big combined universe project. Would you be interested? And I was like, yeah, of course, because at this point, I really am a fan of all those things, and I have a lot of familiarity and, and a lot of connection to those characters, having spent so long working on all of them individually. So to now get to work on them collectively was really cool. And I don't know if you've seen it. I think I have it online somewhere, but I kind of put together a chart where I took elements of the packaging of all those different toy lines and found a way to combine it to make the Revolution packaging so that it would truly be a combined universe thing. But we had a ton of fun with that. There's a little bit of weirdness there, like playing with scale, like, because obviously, like, the original ROM figure is significantly bigger than a GI Joe, which is significantly smaller than a Transformer, et cetera, et cetera. But we had to make it work on the card. So, we played with scale a little bit, but I had a ton of fun working on that series. And it's cool to me that, people still talk about a Hasbro combined universe and still wish that, that would go further. And, we got to do it a little bit. We got to dip our toe in there and kind of see what that would look like. So I hope the fans enjoyed it, and that, Hasbro combined universe stuff can go even further in the future.
And there's a lot of nice touches in all of these action figures. Some of them say assembly required. Some of them say no assembly required. I think they say not suitable for children under 3 years old.
Yeah.
You get that little plastic glare in some of them as well. And so it's really beautifully done on how all this action figure stuff comes about and being presented. And it looks authentic. And I think that's something that if you haven't seen it, everybody, that you should go take a look at these.
I really appreciate that. I certainly tried,
But now I want to change gears, and I want to talk about this for the rest of the time we have here. And this is WWE. Right. Because this is what I think a lot of people know you for. And you did 24 WWE action figure comics. And I got a bunch of them here. So this is a DDP. I think it's now more in center. And this is just one of them, and obviously, as you can see, it's got the white background. It looks like it's hanging up on a peg shelf. For those who are my age or around my age, we remember going to Kmart or Walmart or Target and seeing this stuff hanging up in this type of packaging. Obviously, it didn't say Boom Studios on it, but similar to this. And so, what was this like, and how did all of this initially come about?
So, kind of the same thing. Like, you try for one thing, you shoot for the moon, and you land on Earth, kind of thing. I had been trying. I'm a big Mighty Morphin Power Rangers fan, also, and I had been trying to get to work on that book. And so, I guess there's a lesson here for some people that maybe you can find success in failures. I really wanted to work on Boom's Power Rangers book, and I had asked him a bunch of times, just wasn't getting me anywhere, wasn't happening. But I'd gotten to know some people there because of my endless efforts to do that. Separate of that, I was already designing ring gear for actual WWE wrestlers. And so I want to say it might have just been like anybody else. Like, I think it was like San Diego Comic-Con or something. They had announced that they'd gotten the WWE license. And I just reached out to some of those people again, and I said, hey, you guys, this book is getting off on the ground floor. I don't know what you've got done for it yet, but I said, I am such an unbelievable wrestling diehard fanatic. Like, you don't even know. Like, I mean, that, even saying that doesn't even begin. I mean, I probably spend 10 hours a week watching wrestling, at least. Like everybody, right? For my whole life. And I said, I already work on designing costumes for these people. I'm such a huge fanatic, and I really, really would love to be involved in this book. And maybe like a month or two later, they hit me up and they were like, hey, we have an idea. We think you'd be really great to do these action figure covers for it. And I'll be honest with you, at that point, having done so many action figure covers already, I was kind of like, you don't want to do action figure stuff forever. But at the same time, I was like, I can't really ask for anything more. I love WWE. I do love action figures. And this is sort of a perfect marriage dream project for me. And so that's how it got started. And what I really tried, and to this day, I think that's still the longest run I've had on any comic. I actually did 25 issues. The last one never came out, unfortunately. But we really tried to just find ways to make it fun. Like WWE has probably, I would guess, the biggest toy line of all time, if you collectively count all the different companies that have had the license over the years. And so I really tried, when they would give me characters, or they would ask me for suggestions of characters, I would really try to think of stuff that hasn't been done yet. And so a lot of them, like that DDP, for example, I want to say it was Royal Rumble 2015, I think. He wore that gear.
Nope. Says it right on the thing, which is very cool, which is another nice feature.
I couldn't remember. I put that on there, but I couldn't remember specifically. But so I actually, I know Dallas. And so that photo that's on the front of the card, he actually sent me. I asked him, hey, can you take a picture of yourself wearing this gear for me? Because I didn't have one. But, he's had so many toys made of him from every era of his career. And I thought that was a really cool special night. That was a surprise. No one expected him to be there, well into his retirement. I mean, I don't know if any wrestler ever retires, but, it was a real cool thing to see him come out. And so, I tried to make the figures unique in stuff like that. And, based in outfits that maybe they didn't already have action figures of, are like, the one I did of Mickie James, I actually drew her in an outfit that I designed. So it was kind of fun stuff like that, to just find ways to make them there you go. Yeah, so try to find ways to make them unique and put them in, and make them appealing to collectors, so that you didn't just feel like you were buying a photo of a figure you maybe already owned.
And let's talk about that Mickie James, because it brings us right to where we need to be here. So I love Mickie James. I thought she was great in WWE, her first run. I thought she was phenomenal in Impact. I think she proved herself. And I know that you have a connection to WWE, so we might not be able to say that completely, but I thought her second run with Alexa Bliss was also great. And this was WrestleMania 33, she wore this. Yep. And so what was this like, designing her ring gear and basically developing the concept, designing it, and then it was sewn by another company and put together by another company, but then getting to do a cover of your ring gear with her, which is awesome, in my opinion, and I think it's really special. I think it's really cool. So what was that entire thing like, and how do wrestlers even approach you to get ring gear and stuff like that? Because you've done a bunch of people. We're going to talk about a few of them in a minute.
So every story is different, which is interesting. It's not, I think with ring gear, people assume that you have like a full-time deal with WWE or with a specific company or whatever, and it's really not like that. I mean, I do work directly for WWE as well on merchandise stuff, but when it comes to the ring gear designs, it's word of mouth and it's connections. And, sometimes I'll just have a wrestler randomly pop into my Twitter or something, because they've seen something I did for one of their friends. in the case of Mickie, I think I had already done gear for Billie Kay and Sami Zayn, I believe, prior to that, and Rick Michaels at Global WrestleWear, who is the one that shouted that designed that that sewed that outfit. Sorry. I guess Mickie had reached out to him about doing her Mania gear, and actually it was really cool for me because I was at that Mania, so I got to see that live. It was in Orlando. But they're all really different. Some of them come to you and they have a really fully formed idea of what they want, and some of them have no idea at all and or come to you as a blank slate. And in Mickie's case, she was really easy, super good to work with. She would leave me voice memos and just be like, and this is gonna sound really weird, to someone that's not, but like she'd be like, millennial Indian princess, shiny disco, like, and you just be like, okay, writing this down, and I mean, it just sounds like a brainstorm of words, but it's extremely helpful. When you have someone that kind of has a vision like that, or a mood board, whatever you want to call it, it really helps. And so she did. She had a lot of ideas and a lot of concepts that we could pull from, and she said specific colors she liked, and so from there, it was kind of just trying to find a way to narrow that down to something that she liked. So I would send her concept sketches, and she'd be like, I like this part, I don't like that part, whatever. And eventually, you come together with that. And then, like I said, Rick sewed it and got it to her, and, she walked out in front of 80,000 people wearing it. But everyone's a different story, and she just happens to be one of the really easy ones.
And even to talk about that, what is that like? Because first off, 80,000 people are going to be seeing it.
Sure.
It's WrestleMania, so it's more special. It's not common ring gear being worn out on every Monday Night Raw. And then there's a lot more people seeing it on the WWE Network or pay-per-view buys. And then people are watching it on the replay. And so its reach is not just 80,000 people. And it's not like a comic cover where I don't know how many issues this sold. But clearly this did not probably reach 80,000 people.
Yeah, no way.
Nothing against any of you, it's just the comic book is a lot smaller, and so the fact that she wore this out there is much bigger, and a million people is not an off estimate in this circumstance. So what is that like for you? And I don't want to say your ego, but your art is out there and your concept is out there, because it must be a massive accolade.
Well, to some extent, I'm almost like the Santa's elf. Like I think that unless somebody really finds out about what I've done somehow, like WWE.com did an article about the stuff I've done for Gargano, or like we're talking about it now. But I think a lot of people, and myself included, until you really think about it or you really look for that, it just exists. It's like you don't even think about it. Like you don't see someone on the street and think to yourself like, I wonder who designed that jacket they're wearing. It just is. And so I think that it's not something that I really have ever sweated over so much about that, because I'm removed from it. I mean, I'm fully aware that like my job when I'm designing ring gear is to make them look like a star and accentuate how cool they are. And it's not to put myself over, to use a wrestling term. So, it's cool that I love when people know about it and want to talk about it, and I think it's really awesome that when they appreciate it and they have questions about it. But like for me, it's not really about me so much. Like. And it's definitely like, I mean, like being at WrestleMania and I was right next to the ramp. I think you could even see me at some points. Like, it was super cool to see Mickie walk down and wear that. And it's like, it's like to see this thing that was in your brain, literally coming to life, and it's on a human now walking down a ramp. Like, that's awesome. But it's not, it's not the massive like ego stroke that you might think it would be. I mean, it's really just, it's pride. I mean, it feels really cool to know that you got to play a part in somebody else's big moment. And like, and especially when it's something like WrestleMania or like, like when the people that really appreciate like the toy aspect, like Johnny Gargano, like we just designed stuff for him that he won the NXT title in, and now they're potentially going to make a toy of it. And it's like, that's a really awesome feeling to know that you had that positive effect for that person too. That how much that moment meant to them, and that you got to help them make it special, and now it's getting immortalized as a toy. Even like, it's like a good feeling with a friend. Like you're proud of them for their moment, and you're happy that you got to play a part in it.
And we're going to talk about Johnny, because Johnny is Mr. Wrestling. The guy is fantastic, and he is probably one of the backbones of NXT right now. And you've designed some awesome ring gear for him. You've designed the NXT Phoenix Takeover one. You then went on a Marvel rant with him, Marvel run, and he's a big comic Marvel fan from my understanding. And so he has an Iron Man ring gear. He has the Captain Marvel ring gear. He's got the Wolverine ring gear. And I think the last one is Carnage, if I'm not mistaken.
That's the last Marvel themed one. We've done one since then for NXT in your house too.
And then also you've done some DIY stuff as
Yep.
well with, I think, both Tommaso and Johnny were involved in that.
Yep.
So what is your relationship with him? Because you've done awesome stuff with him, and everybody knows that ring gear. And everybody gets it. It's kind of like the moment where Ricochet came out as All Might in Saudi Arabia. Everybody got it immediately. So what is that like? And considering that you haven't done much work for Marvel, you did one little thing for Marvel.
Yeah.
Which is still pretty cool being on that book. It was awesome.
No, Johnny's the homie, man. He's the man, we actually met at a comic convention. I was during the WWE cover run that I was doing for Boom, and I think somebody had said to me like, "Hey, did you see that like Ember Moon and Mike Rome are walking around?" I was like, "No," and so I said, "But I'm gonna go find them if they are." So I saw them a couple of aisles over, and I just went over and introduced myself and said hi, and we started talking. And Mike said, "We're filming for Up Up Down Down right now with this con." And I said, "Oh man, well, you should come swing by because I'm doing all this WWE stuff." And so he said, "Oh, cool. Let me go grab Johnny and Candice, who I didn't know were there." So this big group of WWE people came over. We filmed a segment, and I talked about all my stuff. And I think at that time he might have just had the match with Andrade, which I think is possibly the best match of the last several years still. And so I said to him, I get you're developing this comic theme now, because I think at that point he'd maybe done 2 of them. And I said, we should really talk because I already was doing work with Main Event Gear, who are the people that sew his costumes. And I said, I already do wrestling gear design, and I work in comic books. And I said, I think we could really do something cool. And he said at that time, and this was well before it actually happened, he said, how would you feel about doing like an Iron Man costume? I said, I feel good about it. I feel good about doing anything. And he said, all right, well, I'll hit you up. And I was like, okay, sure. And so like a month went by, and it's very common at conventions and stuff to kind of exchange these pleasantries. Oh yeah, I'll grab lunch, I'll hit you up. You're not thinking anything's going to come of it. But he did. So he reached out to me on Twitter, and we just started talking. And I think the first one we did was the Spider-Man Venom kind of thing, and it just rolled from there. And it's just that I think that one specifically right out of the gate was just so popular that we kind of there was no turning back. I think after that we did the Punisher one, and at some point along the way pretty quickly we kind of got this idea because when 2 comic geeks get together, you start bouncing ideas back and forth, and we thought it'd be really cool if you could kind of use characters that tie into what's actually happening in your storyline right now and sort of parallel that in your gear. And so we always knew that the end game for this whole thing was going to be Iron Man, that was going to be, the title match. But, he kept getting diverted and sidetracked. Tommaso got injured, or, he'd get betrayed, or, what are these things kept happening. And so we kept changing it up. And that's how we found all these cool gear that kind of paralleled. Like, I remember, like, the Dark Phoenix one I thought was perfect because, like, it felt like, his mind was being manipulated, and it took place in Phoenix, Arizona. And I was like, dude, this is awesome, like, we got to do this. Like, and so it's just, I think to some extent, I almost got more invested in like the storyline part of it as a fan because of that. Because I was like, where would this go next if we were parlaying this into comics, And I think we've done, 10 different sets of ring gear now, I believe, at this point, and 2 of them have already been turned into toys. A third one's in the works, and like, he's the man. We love doing this stuff together, and I think we both have a lot of fun bouncing ideas and just kind of trying to figure out where it goes next,
And one of the things that I like about this, and maybe I'm a little bit selfish because I like exclusivity, is that this stuff is used on takeovers or big NXT shows. It's not used every night. And I think that adds even more value to it. And I think in many ways, the way I'm viewing it, and correct me if I'm wrong, it almost respects the work that you put into it and the design that you put into it, where it actually means something when it's being used and to further a story and to create that pop in wrestling, to use another term. And I think it really helps because when he comes out as Wolverine or Iron Man, you get it. And especially when it's the title and he's the good guy and he's winning the title and becoming the first, Triple Crown winner or Grand Slam winner, it's like it solidifies everything. I think that's a really nice touch on it.
Oh, for sure. I totally agree with you. For me, I think it's really cool to be able to point to a specific moment in time. And on the one hand, it's a lot of work to know you're only going to use it the one time. But on the other hand, it's so those like for me as as a kid, as a fan, you could rattle off the first 10 WrestleManias to me, and I could tell you everything about them because I was obsessed with every little moment and every detail. And then in the last 20 years, I could tell you things about them, but I couldn't tell you everything. And I think that part of what makes stuff so special like that, what creates those iconic, those lasting moments, those visuals, is having stuff that's so specifically tied to those events. So I think for Johnny's case, he's had such a great run these last few years, and I'm very fortunate to have been a part of some of those big moments. But I think to know that you can point to a specific thing and be like, he won the title as Iron Man, or he'd had enough with Tommaso as Venom. It's as a fan, I think that's a really cool thing to point to that, and then when those things get immortalized as a toy or something, or you can go back and view it on the network, it's like, it's that moment in time. It's so specific, and I think that's really cool.
Well, I'm going to be looking for that toy tomorrow because I'm going to Target.
Oh, you
so I'm going to be out looking for that Johnny Gargano. I'm just letting everybody know that if you're in my area in Connecticut, I might push you out of the way to get it. Fair game, everybody.
You're in WWE country. You might have some competition.
I might have some competition, but I'm willing to suplex somebody for it. So that's the end of that discussion. Oh, it's real to us. It's real to us.
Yeah.
But I think we're going to end on that note because I think it's perfect. And I think Johnny's doing great. He's got a match tonight, from my understanding. He's in a triple threat, for anybody watching this. I think that match with Keith Lee and I forget who else is in that match at the moment. That slipping my mind. But it's going to be a great match because Johnny does everything right. But I do want to give you an opportunity, and we barely touched upon half of what I wanted to talk about because you have so much going on. But I do want to give you an opportunity to promote yourself. Where can people find you on Twitter? What's your website? What's your Facebook page? What do you have coming out that you can mention that people should be on the lookout for? Or even anything that's a hint that's coming out in the next 2 months or so that somebody should be like, hey, type in Adam Riches in the next 2 months type of deal?
Give you what I can. Website is adamriches.com. Twitter is @AdamRichesArt. The Facebook page is The Art of Adam Riches, but I think the URL is Adam Riches Art still. Not on Instagram currently. So if you see another Adam Riches there, it's not me. And as far as what to look forward to in the future, that's tough. Unfortunately, I am signed to a lot of non-disclosure agreements, and it's funny because this year especially, I have so many cool things I really wish I could talk to you about.
So things are coming.
Oh yeah. Big things are coming. There's a lot of stuff, especially in the toy world. Lots of cool stuff coming. I can tell you that I've done some work with NECA recently. So when you see the Back to the Future toys coming, I had a hand in a lot of that stuff. Currently on the WWE front, you can probably expect me to keep rolling with Johnny for as long as we can do that. And then I'm developing some gear for Mansoor, which I think is going to be really cool. I got to put him over big. He is really, really awesome. And I think that, if the fans have only seen him at the Saudi Arabia shows, they really have no idea just how talented he is. And I really think he has a high ceiling. So, look for big things from him in the future. But that's about it as far as what I can talk about right now. But we'll do this again sometime in the future and whenever I can. And I've got some really cool stuff on the toy front, the wrestling front. It's just a little too early to be able to talk about it right now.
Well, we are definitely going to have to do this again at some point. As long as I'm on Facebook Live doing this stuff and everything is going good, I would definitely love to have you back. And we're going to definitely have to have a conversation when more stuff comes out because we barely touched upon anything, everybody. I had another 10 pages of questions and everything, and we could have just had an entire conversation about Back to the Future, which we didn't talk about. But I definitely want to encourage everybody, go check out Adam Rich's website. A lot of stuff's on there. A lot of social media links are up there. A lot of artwork is up there. There's a variety of these covers that you could actually see. I think there's some links to some of the variants where they can be purchased at some stores. I know that WonderCon exclusive has a link where you can purchase it. So if you're looking at it and you see that 252, there's a place where you can buy that, and it links to everything. And definitely check it out because you're doing some amazing stuff, and it's been an absolute pleasure. And I know that you're super busy, doing all sorts of stuff. But I'm definitely looking forward to what's out there, what's coming next. And you said it perfectly. Big year for you. Big year's coming.
Big year.
COVID-19 is not stopping you anytime soon.
No, it's been a pretty good year. I hate to admit that, but it's given me, I can't go anywhere anyway, so it's giving me an excuse to hunker down and work that much more. So big things coming.
Well, again, I really appreciate you being on because so are you. Love your comic work, love your toy work, and love everything that you've done. And I am super excited to be doing this at some point in the future. Hopefully in the next 4 or 5 months, maybe. Hopefully that'll give you enough leeway to have some of this big stuff come out. And
hopefully, yeah.
If you read in the newspaper that somebody suplexed somebody in a Target, well, that's me, everybody. So I'm just letting you know that a news story might come out tomorrow about me. So keep that in mind for those who are watching and seeing this for the first time, that suplex in Connecticut Target, that's me.
Awesome, and thank you so much for having me, and it was great chatting with you.